Hello guys and welcome to the channel. In today's video we're going to do a crash course on HTML. So this video is actually for beginners that want to get started with web development, right? Somehow you heard that you need to learn HTML and maybe CSS, and you decided to come to YouTube to search for HTML course. Well, this course is for you, right? So before you get started with learning HTML, right, it's important for me to show you some of the things you will be able to build when you learn how to use HTML among other technologies, right? So this is a responsive website, a simple landing page really, and I have this tutorial on my YouTube channel. So let me just scroll down and show you what it looks like. Yeah, so you'll be able to build this if you know HTML. And well, let me quickly say that HTML is not the only thing you need to build an amazing website, right? There's CSS, there's JavaScript, but HTML is where everything starts. Okay, so you need to start with HTML, right? This is another one. This design is from Front End Mentors, and this is another one on the channel. Yeah, so with HTML and some CSS, you'll be able to achieve this as well. Well, let me quickly come here and say that I have my website is xenotrustacademy.com, and I'll leave a link in the description to my website where I have some courses that I've published. So this one is build website with HTML, CSS, and SAS, beginner to advanced, right? So if you would like a more structured and a more wholesome approach to learning how to build websites with HTML, CSS, and SAS, then I want to encourage you, I want to welcome you to check out my course. So I'll leave a link in the description that will take you to this course, and thank you so much if you decide to buy it. I also have a course on JavaScript and Git, right? So if you want to advance your web development skills, then you need JavaScript. All right, so thank you so much if you decide to support me by purchasing the course. These are some of the projects we build in the course, in the HTML CSS course. This is a restaurant website, right? A simple looking restaurant website. This is a login application, right? There's no JavaScript in this application. It's just HTML and CSS, right? It's an amazing application, by the way. I call it a user interface. Okay, and the very last one is a design agency website, right, that we build in our HTML CSS course. So this is what it looks like, right? So like I said, feel free to check out some of these courses in my website, link in the description. All right, so now we're going to go back and get started with this crash course. All right, moving on, there are some tools you need to be able to learn and write HTML, right? And those tools we're going to be installing in this section. So the first one is Visual Studio Code, right? It's just a code editor. It's my code editor of choice for this particular crash course. So for you to get it, if you don't have it, you can just go to Google and search for download Visual Studio Code. And the very first result should bring you to this page where you can download Visual Studio Code for your operating system, right? I expect that you know how to at least use a computer, how to download and install a software, right? So I'm not going to go through downloading and showing you how to install and all of that. No, you're supposed to know that, right, before you take this course. All right. So the next piece of software is a browser, and I'm using Chrome browser, right? So just search for download Chrome browser. You can actually use any browser you like, but I prefer to use Chrome browser. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about HTML. HTML is an acronym, and it actually stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's the most widely used language on the web, right? We use it to develop websites and web pages, right? It can also be used to develop hybrid mobile apps, okay? And it was created by Berners-Lee, and I think in 1990. I'm not sure about that date, right? There are some different information you find online concerning that date. The latest version is HTML5, and HTML is often used with CSS and JavaScript, right? So using HTML alone is really practice. So you often use it with CSS and JavaScript. So what HTML actually does is, if you see a web page, right? Think of a web page like a house. HTML is actually the building block, or HTML represents the building block for the house. So while CSS, right, represents, the design, right? Maybe you need to paint the house, and you need to, you know design the house in a certain way. CSS represents that, feature of designing and styling a web page, right? JavaScript is then responsible for functionalities, right, that make your web page dynamic. So if you have a house, right, you need to be able to open the door, you need to be able to open the windows, all of those dynamic functionalities is where JavaScript come in. So many times when you are building websites, you are actually going to work with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the front end part of the website. Now, if you don't know what the front end part of a website means, don't worry. As you keep learning, you'd understand it better. Okay, so this was just a quick introduction to what HTML actually is, right? What you should take out of this is that HTML is used to build the structure of web pages. Okay, all right, so now let's continue. So what we're going to do now in this one is that we're going to build our very first web page. And you may be like, oh, if this is your very first time learning HTML, you may be like, are we going to build our very first page right away? Well, yes, this is a fast-paced course, so it's all about practicals, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop, and I'm going to call it HTML, right? All right, so it's just an empty folder, there's nothing in it. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. So I'll right click here, or I'll open my Windows and I'll search for Visual Studio Code, and this is it right here, right? I'll click on it. This is one of the softwares we installed in the previous one, and I actually have it opened up in another tab, so let me just drag it in. So if you're opening Visual Studio Code like for the first time, or this is what you should see, there should be this getting started page and all of that, right? I think you can actually, sorry, let me just move this to the side, and I'm going to move my HTML here, right? So I don't think I've actually tried this before. I'm going to close this getting started, but I think you can actually just drag this your folder inside of Visual Studio Code, and let's see what happens. All right, so great. So now we have our HTML folder inside of Visual Studio Code. Okay, so what we can do at this stage is we can just simply add we can add a, I'm going to close this one. So here we can start adding files to our HTML folder. So what I'm going to do is I'll click on this plus icon here to create a file, and I'm going to name this file, I'll say index, small letter, index.html, right? And I'll hit enter to save that file. Okay, so the file is saved, right? So usually when we build web pages with HTML, right, what we like to do is we like to have our browser on the right and our code editor on the left. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. So this is my Chrome browser on the right and my code editor on the left. Now, before I do anything on this new index.html page I created, right, index.html, I'm going to minimize this, and I would open up this HTML folder. Let me just drag that in. So this is the new HTML folder, and if you notice something, you see that we have this index file inside of it. That is the exact same file we created from Visual Studio Code. So what I can do is I can just drag this and open it up inside of Chrome browser, and well, you don't expect that we would find anything there because it's an empty file. Or yeah, index.html is an empty file. So I'll minimize this, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open this up, right? And here I would write something. So let me just say this is my first web page. Okay, and then I'll save. Well, I've saved the file, but I will need to refresh this page to see the changes I made in this index.html. So I'm going to refresh the page, and as you can see, we now have something on the page, and as you can see here, we have, this is my first web page. So if this is the very first time you are, learning HTML and you got to this stage, I should probably say congratulations to you because you just created your first web page. Okay. So what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about HTML syntax. All right, now we're going to talk about HTML syntax, and HTML syntax really means how HTML is written, right? The format with which HTML is written. So basically, to effectively talk about HTML syntax, there are three keywords we need to take note of. So I'm going to expand my browser. The first is tags, second elements, and the third is attributes, right? These three words, we need to take note of them and understand them. They will help us to explain how HTML syntax works, right? So first off, in the previous example, we created our first web page, and this is just some text, right? What we will describe in regular writing as a paragraph. Well, in HTML, right, there is something known as a paragraph tag. Okay, so what is a tag? So let me just quickly write a paragraph tag to show you how it works. So most times, right, like maybe like 90% of it of the time, there is an opening and a closing tag, right? Before we even talk about that, let's see how a tag is actually written. So I want to write a paragraph, right? I'm not just going to write it the way I did in in the previous example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write a paragraph tag. So it's P, and let me just bring this down, and but this P has to be surrounded by the greater than and the less than sign. Now you notice that Visual Studio Code automatically added this bit for me, right? But actually what I wanted to do is I just wanted to write this paragraph tag. So on the left and right, it has this pointy brackets, right? The less than sign and the greater than sign, right? I just prefer to call it angled brackets. Okay, so now a paragraph has an opening and a closing tag. So I'm going to then close it like this, and then I'll add a forward slash and a P. Okay, so the difference between the opening and the closing paragraph tag, so this is the opening tag and this is the closing tag. The difference is the presence of the forward slash before the P in the closing tag. Okay, so this is what actually what a tag is. Okay, and then because we have a P inside, it's known as a paragraph tag, right? So this is the first term that we've explained using this example, right? A paragraph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what an element is, right? So now we seen what a paragraph tag is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this guy. Oh, sorry. Let me just do it like this. So I'm just going to copy this guy and I'm going to bring it to the next line. Oh, Control Z. I just want one. Now, an element, right, is a paragraph tag that has some content, right, within it. So if I come here and get this text, this is my first web page, and I paste it in, right, this is known as an element. So it has this opening tag, it has some content, and it has, it has the opening tag, some content, and a closing tag. Okay, so all of this is known as an element. Okay, so what I can do now is I can save this, and let's come here and refresh the page. So if I refresh this page, you see now that we now have this is my first web page. Now it looks like it's exactly the same with the first one, right? Actually it is, but the difference is that this one is correctly written, right? And another reason is HTML is actually a forgiving language. So if you do something like this, well, it's still going to just display it as a paragraph, but this is absolutely not what you want to do, right? It's bad practice. Okay, great. Now we've been able to see what a tag is, right? Which is just this letter with angled brackets around it, and then we saw that we have an opening and a closing tag, and then we said that if you take a content and put it in between the opening and a closing tag, that constitutes an element. Okay, so the last point we have is an attribute. So what is an attribute? Well, an attribute actually is adds some additional information to an element, okay, or it can define certain properties of an element, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as an example. So I'll come here, I'll copy this and I'll paste it in. Now, there are two things you need to know about attributes. The first is that an attribute should always be inside the opening tag. So inside of this guy here is where the attribute is going to be placed. So I'll give a space there and I'm going to set an attribute here. Now, that's the first thing you need to know. The second thing you need to know about attributes is that they have a key and a value. What is this key and a value thing we're talking about? So let's see. So here I'm going to set a title attribute. Okay, so that is actually the key. And the way you set it is you say equal to, and then you use quotes and define what you want. So what I'm going to say, I'll just say tooltip. Okay, and then I'll save. Now if we come to our page and we refresh this page, of course maybe I'm going to change the content. Well, I'll just refresh the page here and we still have the same content. Let me just say this is my second web page, just so that it's different. Okay, if I refresh this page one more time, you see that it has changed here to second web page. Great. Now this attribute we've set here, let's see what it does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover on this guy here, and as you can see, we now have that text tooltip. Okay, so this is exactly how an attribute actually is written. Okay, and as we learn HTML, as we learn how to build web pages, we're going to work a lot with attributes. Okay, so those are the three things you need to know: a tag, an element, and an attribute. With these three concepts under your belt, well, you've actually learned maybe like 20% of how HTML syntax work. The rest is just knowing the different tags, knowing when to apply them, and all of that. So that's what we're going to get started and continue doing in the course. Now let's talk about the structure of a web page, right? But before we do that, there's something I'd like us to do very quickly. Okay, so if you look on this left sidebar of Visual Studio Code, at the bottom here we have this icon, extensions. So if I click on it, right, it will show me some extensions that help extend the functionality of Visual Studio Code. One thing I want us to download is, if you come to this top here, search for live server. I already have it installed, by the way, and we cannot. Okay, great. So now live server, you can go ahead and install the first one by this guy, Rick Day. Okay, so just go ahead. You'll see like a button here. Just click on it and it will install. Right, when you do that, you may need to restart your Visual Studio Code for it to take effect, right? And so that's it. Then there's another tool, right, that actually Emmet has. It's called Emmet, that Visual Studio Code has. It's called Emmet. Okay, if you maybe use another code editor, Emmet is actually something that you need to install, but Visual Studio Code makes it very easy for us. So Emmet actually comes with Visual Studio Code. Okay, so let me show you how you can activate Emmet. So to activate Emmet, well, if it's not activated, well, what you need to do is you need to just come and click on this manage cogwheel icon here, and you see some options here. Just click on settings, and here you can just search for Emmet. Okay, so you'll see various options here, but what I want you to click on is edit in settings.json. If you click on that, it will open a file called settings.json, right? What I can do is I can expand this, right? So I'm just going to scroll to the top, right? So this is the very top of the file, but if I scroll down, right, there's this guy here. You see emmet.trigger expansion on tab. In your code editor, it may be set to false, right? If it's set to false in your code editor, right, just change it to true, and that's all, and save. Control S. Right, if it doesn't exist on your settings.json file, like if you scroll from the top to the bottom and you don't find it on your settings.json file, what you can do is you can just copy exactly what is here, right? The same way it is, just type it out and set it to true, and that's all you need to have Emmet activated on your Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'm not going to save that, so let's continue, right? So I'll click on this Explorer here so that I can see my files. So what we're going to do in this one is that we're going to look at the structure of a web page, right? To look at the structure of a web page, I would actually go ahead and delete this stuff, right? Since you've already copied it, since you've already worked on it. So the main structure of a web page is something that you need to know as a beginner. So let me show you how it is. So first off, I'm just going to do an Emmet shortcut, then I'll explain. So first off, in a web page, permit me to close the Explorer. The first thing you need to do is you need to define the type of document. Okay, so I'm just going to give some space. So here we have document type, right? And it's set to HTML. Now the next thing we have is the language. Okay, so HTML language, and it's set to English. So this can actually be set to other languages, but for our case it's set to English. Then we have a head. So basically we have a head, and so this is everything in the head, and we have a body. The main content of your web page goes inside the body. Okay, now but before we come to the body, let's look at this head closely. We have some tags that I would actually not want to go in at the beginner level. Okay, but one tag that is very important for our head is this title. So what I can do is I will change this to my web page, and then I'll save. Now remember that previously we had to refresh the page to see changes. Well, that can change now because we now have live server installed. So if I right click, I would see an option that says open with live server. So I'll open this with live, I'll click on open with live server, and it will open in this browser, right? So I can go ahead and close this one because I now have this guy open here. Now if you look very closely at the top of this page here, you'll see that we now have this my web page. So let me expand, and you see here we have my web page. That's the title that we set in the head, right? So you see here my web page, this title, that's what is actually being displayed here. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to go into all of this, what all of this does here, like as a beginner, right? I'm not going to go into that, but eventually we're going to learn what they represent. So the next thing we have is the body, and all of the content of our page actually goes into the body. So if I create a paragraph tag here now and say this is a paragraph and save, because we have live server, it's going to load automatically, and we'll see our change on the page. So this is a paragraph. All right, so I just wanted us to go through the structure of a web page, right? So define the document type. We have an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag, right? We have a head tag and a closing head tag, and we have some content inside of the head tag. One of the ones we saw is the title, and then we have a opening and closing body tag which contains a paragraph, and really the body tag contains all of our page content. So that's it about the structure of a web page. So in the next one now, we're going to start looking at the various elements, that's the various tags that we can use when we are building out our page. All right, but there's something I forgot, right? We activated Emmet on our Visual Studio Code, right? What is the importance of having Emmet, right? Emmet is a plugin that makes it faster for you to write HTML. It makes it easier and faster for you to write HTML, right? So if I get rid of everything here, I'm just going to cut it out, and let's say I want to start a fresh page. I can actually just press the exclamation mark, and I'll hit tab, right? I'm using a Windows, right? I'm going to hit tab, and what will happen is that Emmet will create this boilerplate for me to start writing HTML. That's what I did the first time, right? So I just wanted to point out to you, right? So but I have a playlist on my channel that shows you how you can use Emmet, different things Emmet can do for you, right? And different tips and tricks with Visual Studio Code, right? I'm going to leave that in the description so you can check that out. Okay, I don't want to make this video excessively lengthy by talking about Emmet. Okay, All right, so let me just undo this and let's get continue. So what we're going to do is that we're going to look at the various tags that we can actually use when we're building out our page. And but before we get started, let me show you how you can actually add a comment to your page. Now this is a paragraph, right? If we have so many components, so many elements on our page, sometimes it's important to just add a comment to separate these components. Okay, so a comment is just some text that is not displayed on the web page. So let me show you how you can add a comment. So I'm going to do that with MS shortcut, and I'll explain it. So I'll press Control and forward slash. If you're using a Mac, that will translate to Command and forward slash. Okay, so this is how you add a comment in HTML, right? An angled bracket, an exclamation mark, two dashes, and then this is the closing part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some text. I'll say this is a comment, and then I'll save. Now see, the page actually refreshes, but this text here, this is a comment, doesn't actually display on the page, right? So that's exactly what a comment does, something that helps you describe what you're doing on your page that is not displayed on the web page itself. Okay, that's what a comment is. All right, great. So now let's look at what a header tag is. That's where we're going to start from. So let's continue by looking at the tags that we'll need to build out the structure of our web page. We've already seen one, which is the paragraph tag. So what I'm going to do is I can actually change this comment to paragraph tag. Okay, and of course if you save that, it's still not going to display on the page. So what I'm going to do is also I'm going to separate the various tags that we'll talk about with a line. Okay, and the way we do that in HTML is we use the HR tag. HR actually stands for horizontal rule. If I save this now, you see on the page that we now have a line on top here. Now if you notice something, this HR tag is one of the tags that is just a self-closing tag. If you look at this paragraph tag, you see that we have an opening tag and a closing tag, but the HR tag is a self-closing tag, and it's one of the few self-closing tags we have in HTML. Okay, so now next we're going to look at the header tag. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just come here, I'll add a comment, and I'll say header tag. And the way we write the header tag is we use h1. Okay, if I do h1 and say heading 1, so maybe I should just do that with capital letter, heading 1, and I save that. Watch how it displays on the page. Okay, so you see the difference between a heading tag and a paragraph tag. It's bolder. Okay, now for the heading tag, we have like from h1 up to h6. Okay, and the difference is the size and the space at the top and the bottom of the tag. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy h2 down to h6, and I'll paste that in here, and I'll save and watch it on the page. So you see, so we have h1, h2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and as you can see, the size of the text gets smaller as we come down. Okay, so okay, like I said, we've seen a paragraph tag. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at some elements we can use to some tags we can use to format a paragraph tag. So I'll come here, let me add a horizontal rule HR, and I'll hit tab. If I do HR and I hit tab, Emmet is going to complete the tag for us. So I'll hit tab, and as you can see, Emmet has completed it. So here I would add a comment. I'll say formatting text. Okay, so in this one we're just going to see some of the things we can do to format a text. So I'll add a paragraph here, and I'll say this text is bold. Let me save that and let's see what happens on the page. Okay, so you see here, first we've separated the heading from this bit on top, this text on top, and we have this text is bold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to surround this bold with a tag called strong. Okay, so I'll type strong and hit the tab key, and it will create an opening and closing tag. Emmet will create an opening and closing tag. Now basically I can cut this bold and put it in here, so, and then I'll save and let's see what happens. So you see this text is bold and this is actually bold, and that is because we've wrapped it inside a strong tag. So that's one thing we can do, but then there's another concept here, and that is that we can have a tag inside of a tag. Okay, that's what just happened here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this downwards, and I'll change this to this text is italicized. Okay, and then I'm going to change this strong tag. I'll change it to em. Em actually stands for emphasis. Okay, and then if I save, watch what happens. So you see this text is actually italicized. So let's go ahead and see some more. So I'll come here and I'll say this text is marked, and I'll change this to mark. Okay, so let's go ahead and save, and you see this text is marked. Okay, so let's do one more. I would duplicate this downwards, and I'll change this to this text is cancelled. Okay, and then I'll change this to del, sorry, that's the short form for delete. And then if I save this, watch what happens. Okay, so this text is cancelled. Okay, all right, so that's it about formatting text. Right now, what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about lists. Like lists, you see a website, you see that there are different kinds of things that are listed out. So once more, I'm going to separate this with a, sorry, Control Z. I'm going to add a line, so HR, which stands for horizontal row. I'll hit the tab key and save, and that will put a line up here. Okay, so I'll add a comment here, and then I'll say lists. Okay, but when it comes to lists, right, there are two kinds of lists. There is a numbered list and an unnumbered list, if that's a word, right? But the way it's described is they call it ordered list and unordered list, right? The ordered list is numbered and the unordered list isn't. Okay, so first off, we're going to start by looking at the ordered list. Okay, or maybe we should start from the unordered list. Okay, so what the way you create an unordered list, so let me add a comment here, and I'll say on ordered lists. Okay, so the way you create an unordered list is you use the UL tag, which stands for unordered list. So basically, this is the UL tag that stands for unordered list. Inside of this list is where you then add the list items. So the way you add a list item is you use the LI tag, which stands for list. And then here, I'm just going to say HTML. And if I go ahead and save, you'll see here that we now have this HTML here. So what I can do is I can duplicate this downwards, and here I'll change this to CSS, and the last one I'm going to make JavaScript, and then I'll save, and let's see what we get. Okay, so here we then have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's an unordered list, right? So the difference between this and an ordered list is the numbering. So what we can do is let's see how an ordered list actually is. So what I can do is let me come here and let me add a comment and say ordered lists. Oh, sorry, ordered lists. And here I would actually just grab this guy, I'll copy it and I'll paste it in here, and I'll change this UL to OL. So sorry, that should be OL. So OL actually stands for ordered list, and then I'll save, and let's see what happens. So we now have 1, 2, 3 instead of just the disk what will I call it, dots in front of the list items. Okay, so that's the difference between an unordered list and an ordered list. Okay, so yeah, then for this there are some, let's talk about some attributes we can use on this ordered list. For example, so inside of this opening tag, remember we said that when we are working with attributes, they should actually go into the opening tag, right? Inside of this opening tag, I'm going to come here and say reversed, and then I'll save. It should actually be reversed, and then I'll save, and watch what happens here. So we now have 3, 2, 1. Okay, so there are some attributes that you just specify them, right? You don't need to just a single word, you don't need to say they don't have the typical feature of an attribute that has a key and a value. Okay, this is one of them. Okay, all right. So even in the unordered list, right, we can have like an attribute. So here, let me add a type attribute. So I'll say type for the unordered list, right? And I'll set it to be equal to, and the value must be inside of quotes. It can be single or double quote, but I just prefer double quotes. Okay, and here I'm going to say type, I'll say circle, and then I'll save, and let's see what happens. So you see, we now have this circle in front of the list items. Okay, I think the default is dots. I think dots. Is it dots or dot? Yeah, dots. Yeah. Okay, so here is just another example of attributes we talked about earlier on. Okay, so next what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about images and what we call fav icons. Okay, so but for that, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add an image inside of our folder. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the HTML folder. Okay, and inside of this HTML folder, I'm going to create a new folder inside here. So I would come and I'll right click and I'll say new folder, and I'll just say folder, and I'm just going to name this folder images. Okay, great. Okay, so now I would open this folder and I'll just paste in some items. Okay, so let me just paste them in, and here we have 2 images, a video, and an audio file, an mp3 file. Okay, we're going to use these files for explanation, right? But I just put everything inside the images folder. Ideally I should actually separate them, but since it's just for explanation, they still work basically the same. So I'm going to minimize this and I'm going to bring up my code editor. Great. So what we're going to do first is we're going to see how we can add an image to our page. So permit me to add a horizontal rule HR, and I'll hit the tab key to separate my list from the images section. Okay, so above here I'm going to add a comment and I'll say adding images. Okay, I'll just say adding images. I think that's fine. So to add an image, right, an image, we're gonna use an image tag. So the way you do that is you say img, right? And let me just hit that, and the image tag will take 2 attributes. The first attribute is the source attribute, and this source attribute simply is where we specify the location of the image. In our case, if I come here and open my file explorer, in our case we now have an images folder, so it's inside an images folder, and then we then have the image laptop.jpg, okay, or jpg. So basically, let me just close this up here. I'll come here, and the way I'll first go into the image folder or into the images folder, I'll use a dot and a forward slash. Okay, and you see the code editor is already showing me the folder that's available. So I'll click on that images folder, and then inside of that images folder, my code editor is already suggesting various images. So what I need is the laptop.jpg. I'll click on it, and I may as well have actually typed out all of this. Okay, but just because Visual Studio Code gave me the selection, I just clicked on it. Okay, so this alt, right, is simply an alternative text that will show on the page if maybe for some reason the image cannot be located. Maybe your user has a slow server or something like that, slow internet or something like that. This alternate alt tag, alt attribute is what is going to be displayed on the page. So I'll show you how it works, but let me just say laptop here, and I'll save. Now watch what happens. So you see, now we now have the image on the page. Of course, it's a very large image, so it's not responsive, right? We'll see how we can make an image responsive when we talk about CSS. Okay, So but if for any reason this image cannot be located, right, if for example if I come here and add an A to the laptop, which means that it will not be found because there is no such image. If I save that, watch what happens. Now we have this text here, this laptop text, alt text, we now have it displayed here. Okay, so that's what this alt text actually stands for, right? So but let me undo that and save so that we now have our laptop image. So the next thing we're going to add to the page is what is known as a fav icon. So to illustrate that, I'll just do google.com. Okay, I'll do google.com. Let me expand this page. Right now, if you look on this tab here, you see that we have this Google image or this Google icon. It's called a fav icon. Okay, so I'll show you how you can add this to your page, since we've seen how to add an image to our page, right? So but for that, we need to actually come to the head tag. So in this head tag, right, we have some of these properties, these meta tags here. For simplicity's sake, right, I'm just going to get rid of all these meta tags, right, for simplicity's sake. So we just have this title here. Now to add a fav icon to our page, which I said is this icon you see here. So let me go back to my page, right? We need what is known as a link tag, right? So if I say link and I click on it, immediately we get this fill up here. So I'm going to just get rid of this style sheets, right? Now for the rel attributes, we're going to set the value to icon because we want to add an icon, right? Then for the href simply is where we specify where the image is or where the icon is. For this image, right, the source attribute is where we specify the location of the image. For a fav icon, the href attribute is where we specify the location of the icon. So remember, we're going to go into the images folder and we have a fav icon.png that I copied. So I'll just click on it. And the last thing we can do is we can set a type attribute. So I'll say type and I'll set the type to it's an image. So I'll say image / and then the extension of the image. In this case, it's PNG. Okay, so I'll say PNG and then I'll save. Now watch what happens. Okay, so suddenly we now have our own icon here like Google. Okay, so that's how you can add an icon to the head of your page, okay, or the head tag of your page. All right, so next let's see how we can add an audio file to our page, right? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a horizontal line to separate the page, and I'll add a comment here and say audio files. Okay, so below this comment audio files is where I'll show you how you can add an audio file. So we do that using an audio tag. So I'll say audio and I'll hit tab. Okay, sorry, Control Z, right? Okay, so right away from this source here, I can actually just go ahead and specify the location of the audio. So I'll say // remember we have it in our images, and see we have ben.mp3. So if I click if I select that and I save, let's see what happens. Okay, so we actually cannot see the tag the mp3 right away, but let me show you a different way we can do this, right? But before I even show you the different way, it's not that this audio file cannot be accessed right from this point here. It can actually be accessed, but we've not specified that we want the mp3 controls to be displayed on the page, right? So if I come here just after this source attribute, I give a space and I say controls, okay, that's CONTROLS, and then I save, right? What will happen is that we'll now have this mp3 player kind of here, and all of the controls are here. So we can play, you can pause, right? You can adjust the volume and stuff like that. You can mute it, you know, all the controls are just here. You can even download it. Okay, so this is the native, you know, mp3 player on that we can, you know, use in html, right? But there's even a better, there's a different way, there's a better way, I should say, that we can do this stuff. For example, if the format that you the format of the mp3 that you want to play on the computer is not supported by the browser, then you're going to have some issues. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of everything inside here, right? And I'm just going to open the audio tag like this. Now inside of this audio tag, I'm then going to create a source tag, what is known as a source tag. Inside this source tag is where I will then specify the source. So that src attributes we did before, I will then specify it inside of the source tag. So I'll say images and then ben.mp3. Okay, and then for this one I'm then going to need to specify the type. Okay, so the type attribute is going to be, it's an audio file, so audio, and this one has an mp3 format, so I'm going to say mp3 and then I'll save. Now you notice that it doesn't change anything. Let me see, I think I missed something, let me just be sure. Oh, I didn't add my controls here, so here I still need to specify the controls attributes. Okay, so that it will enable the audio tag to be displayed and all of the controls will be shown on the page. Okay, so yeah, so but for example, if the user's browser does not support the format, right? mp3 format is not the only format of audio file that exists, right? If you have another format, like I think there's this is it oog or I can't exactly remember, right? Or okay, I'm sure of .wav. So for example, if you have .wav formats of the same file, you can actually add that and you can come here and specify the file format as wav. Okay, lastly, if the user's browser does not support that, you know, file format, you can then add a message here, something like maybe like your browser does not, or something like that, shall support this file format. Okay, so you can add a message, and but because we have a browser that supports mp3, it's going to select the mp3. Okay, so that's what actually happens. Okay, so I just wanted to point out that there's a better way to add mp3 files to your there's a better way to add mp3 files to your html page. Okay, so next let's see how we can add a video file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a horizontal row to separate this guy, and here I'm going to add a comment and say video file. Okay, so natively we can also add a video file to our page. Okay, and I can imagine you're already guessing we're going to use a video tag. Okay, so we're going to use a video tag, and I'm not going to specify the source even though I can. Okay, instead I'm just going to say controls here. Okay, so for this video tag I'm going to come in here, and just like I did for this one here, I can actually just grab this source line of code here and paste it inside my video tag, but I'll then change the file to, I can't remember the name of that video. Okay, subscribe.mp4, and the type is then going to be changed to video, and this one is going to be changed to mp4. Okay, so if I go ahead and save this, we'll have a video on the screen. So let me scroll up, but it's a very large video. Okay, so one thing I can do is I can set a width attribute for this video. So in the opening tag, just after the controls, I'll come here and say width, and I'll set it to 360 pixels, and then I'll save. Now if truly this is your very first time of you know, learning HTML, then you may not know how we measure stuff in HTML, right? But pixels is one of the common ways we measure dimensions in HTML, right? So this is just 360 pixels, and it has reduced the size of the video to something that fits on the screen. Okay, that's the width property. Okay, so basically that's how you can add a video to your That's how you can add a video to your HTML page. Okay, so what we're going to look at next is we're going to look at forms. Okay, form is a very important topic that you need to actually understand. So what I'm going to do is, let's separate this guy with a horizontal rule. Okay, and save. So everything is separated, as you can see. So we have our line up here, and here we're going to come down and we're going to come down and we're going to add a comment and say forms. Okay, so like I said, form is very important. It's something you're going to definitely work with if you are in web development. So the way you create a form is you use the form tag, right? If I hit tab, you see here that in this opening tag, automatically my code editor gives me an attribute that is called action, that has a key of action. The value is empty. Well, I don't need the action to do anything now, and it's not something I want to talk about in the scope of this crash course, right? But inside of the form, we can have different fields. Okay, one of those fields is an input field. So here I'm going to say input, and I'll just hit tab, and immediately my code editor has given it a type attribute of text. If I save this guy here now, just watch what happens on the page. Let me close this guy. I may need to actually comment out this video. So but here we now have an input field, and I can type inside of this input field, right? So let me just delete what I just typed in. Right now, for this input field, sometimes when you see a form in on maybe a website, right, you'll see that there may be something inside the form, and when you start typing, that text is going to disappear. That's called a placeholder. We can add that using what is known as a placeholder attribute. So I'll say placeholder, and I'll just set it to maybe username, and then I'll save. Now inside of this form, you see here that we now have this username, right? But immediately I start typing, it disappears. That's known as a placeholder. Okay, so there are different, like this type attributes. It can actually be something else. It can be like a number, right? So I'm going to duplicate this form, right? So we now have two inputs, sorry, and I'm going to change this to number. Okay, and save. Now we have, oh, this placeholder also needs to be changed. So let's just say age. Age is actually a number, right? So here we now have username and age, and here, by giving it this attribute of number, you can actually you can't type a text inside. It must be a number. It has to be a number. Okay, but now if you notice something, you notice that this form is displaying one beside the other. So there are different ways we can actually make it come, one. We can actually bring this age to the bottom of the username, right? But I'm going to choose a very simple way by using what is known as a break tag. BR. A break tag is just something that moves the next what's it called, that adds a space between inputs or between elements. So if I save that, it will bring this age to the next line, okay, which is more of what we want. So I can even have two break tags. So let me just, let's have two break tags, and let me save so we can have more space. Okay, great. I just want to keep things as simple as possible. That's why I'm using this break tag. And you'll notice that this break tag is one of the self-closing tags we've seen. We've seen the horizontal, we've seen the input. This break tag is one of the self-closing tags. So, but what we can also do is that we can, instead of using a break tag, right, which is going to look very messy, we can put this input inside the paragraph. So here, I'll come here, I'll add a paragraph tag, right? And inside of this paragraph tag, I would cut this input and I'll paste it in here, and then I'll just get rid of this guy here as well. So what I can do is I can create another paragraph tag and put the second input here. And before the end of this video, we'll see why some tags, right, occupy the full length, the full width of their container, and some do not. Okay, so let me save that, and you see we still have them on different lines, but because we've placed them inside the paragraph, right, I can come here and add a text. I can say maybe something like username, and like something like this, or something like this, a colon, and here I can say age, for example, and then I can save and watch what happens. So you see now we now have this text in front of it. Okay, so now let's see different some other types of input here. So I'm going to show you the password. So what I can do is I can actually just copy this guy and paste it in another line, and then I'll change this to password. So password, and then I'll change the type also to password. And if you save that, let's see what happens. So we still have this placeholder here, so I'm just going to get rid of the placeholder because I don't want any placeholder for my password. So let me get rid of it, and I'll save. So for this password now, if I type into it, watch what happens. So you see the content of what I'm typing is hidden because it's actually supposed to be a password, and that's what this input type of password actually does. Okay, so now we're going to see another one. We're going to see the checkbox. So I'll come here, I'll copy this guy, come to the next line and paste it in, and I'm going to say here, I'll say remember me, and here I'm going to give it a type of checkbox. So checkbox, and then I'll save, and let's see what happens. So you see here we now have this checkbox, and if we click on it, it's just like what you see when you try to log into Facebook or any website, for example. You see that remember me checkbox. Okay, and if you want this to be checked by default, all you just need to do is to add the checked attribute. Okay, and if you save that, you see it will be checked by default. Okay, let's see another one. Let's see the select option, right? So what I can do is, you know what, I'm just going to create a new paragraph, and here I'm going to say coding language, NGU, this should be A. Okay, and what's going on here? Oh, okay, so coding language, I'm then going to add a select, so I'll say select tag. Okay, I'm not going to give the select tag any of this attribute here. I'm just going to do a simple select tag, and inside the select tag we're going to add some options. So I'll say option, and I'll get rid of this value. I'm not going to set any value for it. So here I'll say HTML. I'll just duplicate this twice, and here I'll say CSS, and the last one is going to say JavaScript. Okay, and then I'll save. Let's see what we have on the page. So now you see here that we have this selectable option, and if you click on it, you will see the various options inside it. Now there's one trick you can do, right? If you want any of them to be selected at first, right, ideally the first one will be selected, but if you want something else to be selected, maybe JavaScript or CSS, for example, you can come here and add an attribute, say selected, and if you save that, CSS will be selected. You see that? Okay, so that's how that works. Also from your form, you can have a file select option, right? So here, let me just come to the bottom of this place, and I'll add a paragraph to, and then I'll add an input, or before then I'll say select file. So like as if your user wanted to upload a file, and then I would add an input. This input is going to have a type of file, and if you save that, you see here that we now have, let me close this, you see that we now have this choose file option here, and if you select it, you'll be able to get access to the files on the user's computer. Okay, so that's what we have there. All right, so that's one. Then there is one I also want to talk about, and that's the text area. So let me do another paragraph, and for that I'm just going to use the text area tab. Okay, I'm not going to bother setting the name and ID. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of it, right? But this col and row is actually defining the size of the text area. But let's save this and see what we have on the page. Okay, so this is a text area, so it's just like a larger, area where your user can add some text. So you can use this in a contact form if you want them to add a message or something like that. Okay, so the last component I would like to show us is the button component. So let me just say button. Okay, button tag, and inside here you specify what you want the button to say. So here I'll just say submit. Okay, and then I'll save. Let's see what happens. For some reason okay, yeah, so this is our submit button. I wasn't actually looking at that point there. Okay, so I think these are the main what's it called. Okay, there's also the radio button, right? But by and large, these are the major things you'd actually use when you're working with a form. Maybe I should actually show you the radio button before we go. So a radio button is very similar to a checkbox, except that when you have like 2 or more radio buttons, only one can be selected. So I'm just going to put it before the text area. This is the text area, so I'll put it in a paragraph, right? And here I'm going to say input. So this is input with a type of radio, and it's going to have a name. So this name is going to be the name is an attribute, right? It's going to be gender. So I'll just say gender, and you'll see shortly why this gender is important. Now I'll duplicate this guy, and let me just save that. Okay, so we'll do it gently. So you see now here we have 2 input fields, right? Now if you click on one, it's selected. If you click on the other, right, you see that this one is first deselected and then this one is selected. That's because we have a gender, the same name for the both buttons. So this gender here, right? So what I can do is in front of this first input, I can add maybe some text. So I can say male. Okay, and here let me just say female and save. Okay, so you see here we now have male, and if you select it here we have female. Okay, but ideally you should not just add text like this. What you should do is you should put it Ctrl X, you should put it inside a label. So I'll come here and say label. Okay, and then I'll say I'll paste in the name there. Now you see that this label we have 4. This 4, I can actually just say gender, or maybe I should actually just leave it out for now. Okay, so let's just stick to the basics. So I'll just copy this guy, and instead of typing female here, I'll just put it here and set the label to female, and then I'll save that. Okay, so it doesn't really change anything, right? But it's for semantics. So at the end of this lecture, we're going to talk about semantic markup. Okay, basically your markup actually has meaning. It's not just about writing tags. These tags have meaning, especially to search engine and to laying out your page. Okay, we're going to talk about that at the end of the project. Okay, so but as far as form is concerned, I think we've touched most of the basics for what we need to know about forms. Okay, so now let's talk about links, right? Links is very important for your web page because you need to connect your web page together using links. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll do a horizontal rule to separate these guys. Okay, and then I'll add a comment here and say links. Great. Now for links, right, there are 2 kinds of link we want to talk about. The first is what we call absolute link, or absolute URL, whichever one you want to call it. Now, but first, how do we write links? So we write links using the A tag, and it's one of so what I can do now is I can just press tab, and you see here that we have this href attributes, right? And you remember before when we did this where are we now exactly? When we did this link up top here, we said that the href will specify where the image is. In using this a tag, right, the href actually specify where you want to go. So now we're talking about absolute links. Absolute links simply means that you are going to a website that is entirely different from your website. So for example, if I go to YouTube, or let me just, can I go to Google? Yeah, I think I can go to Google. So if I go to Google, for example, let me just type Google here, control C, and I come here, I paste it in, escape. If I come here and I say Google and then I save, so let's come back to our page, right? You see up top here we now have Google. Now if I click on this Google, watch what happens. So it actually opens up Google and our web page is gone. But of course we can go back by clicking on this back icon here and we'll be back to our web page. Okay, so that's what's known as an absolute link. The link is entirely different from your website. Now let's look at the other type of link, which is a relative link. This is just a link that is going to another part of your web page, right? Like another page on the same website. So I'm going to add an a tag, but before we can go to another page, we actually have to create another page. So here I'm just going to click on this new file icon, and then I'll say maybe about.html. okay, and inside of this about.html, well, let me just add my HTML boilerplate, and I'll just hit tab, and in the body here I'll add a paragraph or maybe a heading h1 that will say about us. Okay, and I think that's it. No fancy stuff here. Of course you won't see that here, but if we come to this link here, and let me close this up, and we then link to the about us page, because they are on the same level. Like the about us page is on the same level with the home page, so you see they're on the same level inside the HTML file. I can link directly to the about us page. So here I can just say about.html, and then inside of between the opening and the closing tag, I'll just say about or about us, something like that, and then I'll save. Of course, beside this guy here, you see the about us page, and shortly we'll talk about why when you write some tags, they are stacked beside each other, and when you write others, they take up the full width, right? We'll talk about it. So but now if I click on this about, watch what happens. So it takes us to the about us page, right? So let me just go back. Okay, so from this about us page, I can even add a link, right? Let me add a link here, and here I'll just say home. Oh, sorry, this is index.html, and I'll say back to home, and let me save that. Okay, now if I go to the about us page, on the about us page we now have back to home. Let me click on it and let's see what happens. So it takes us back to our index page. So like this is like, if you actually understand this, then you've made a lot of progress if you know how to link between pages. So but then there's one thing I want to do, like for example this Google, what if you didn't want it to open on your website? What if you wanted to open it in a new tab? Okay, so what you can do is you can set an attribute on the link. So where's my Google? Absolute link, we have Google. I can just come here, give a space before the angled bracket, and then I'll set an attribute called target. I'll set that target to underscore blank. What this will do is that it will open this Google in a new tab. So I'll save that and let's try it up here. So let me close this one, and I don't think we need this anymore. So I'll click on Google and watch what happens. So you see now that it opens in a new tab, and we still have our home page, our index page opened up here. So that's how you add you open pages in a new tab, right? There's one more thing you need to know, right? When you are opening a link to another website, right, there's, for security reasons for your own website, right, you need to add a property called rel. Okay, and you set this is actually for security reasons for your own website, right? there is a way a hacker can take advantage of your website. If when you use the target underscore blank, okay, I can get some information from your website via that link. So what you can do is when you set the rel, you can set it to no referrer, okay, and then you save. Okay, of course it will not change anything about the link, it will still work as usual, but then it will make your website more secure. Okay, all right, so that's, I think that's it about link. There's just one more thing, right? You can actually link your email or your phone number, right? Let me show you how you can do that. So this is relative link, so I'm just going to come down here, I'll add an a tag, and if I wanted to link my email, like when some, let me say something like, I'll say something like send an email. Okay, so if I want it such that when a user clicks on this send an email, it will open up their email client with my email, you know, already set. What I can do is this href, I can set it to mail to, because I want to send the mail to, and then I'll then specify the email. So I can just say something like Zeno, or let me just use a generic, so I'll say example@gmail.com. okay, and save this guy. Now we'll have a new link, send an email. If I click on this send an email, watch what happens. It will attempt to open an email client, which apparently is not okay. Yeah, good. So it's attempting to open an email client on my computer. So you see mail here. So if I click on OK to open this mail, but of course I don't want to do that. Also, you can do this for your phone number, right? So I can duplicate this and I'll say maybe call us, or maybe this will have like a phone icon, and here you will need to change this to tel, which stands for like telephone, and then you specify the number. So the number can be maybe plus 234, you know, just add a number or something like that and save. And then if you click on it, it will also attempt to open your, you know, your call. If it's a phone, really, you got to use this on a phone, right? If you use it on a phone, it will attempt to open your contact, and it will display that number there, so you can easily just call that person from there. Okay, so I think that's it about links. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is, let's talk about types of elements, right? So you'll notice that when we create links like this, right, the links appear side by side, right? Whereas when we create maybe this heading, for example, they take up their whole, the width of that space where they exist, where they were created. Okay, so this heading can actually be here, but it's not. So that brings us to the concept of types of element. There are two kinds of elements. The first is the inline and the block element. Okay, for the basics, right, those are the two kinds of elements we need to focus on. The block element is an element that takes up the full width of its container. Okay, so a typical example would be this heading or this paragraph. So you see this heading is taking up the whole width, it's taking up the whole width and all of that. An inline element is an element that only takes up the space it needs on the page, okay, in terms of the width. So if you see these links now, you see that they are taking up just the space they need, and right beside it, the next link is, you know, stacking up. That's known as an inline element. Subsequently, when we start writing CSS, you'll see how we can convert an inline element to a block element and vice versa. Okay, but for the basics, those are the two things you need to know. Now let's talk a little bit about semantics in HTML, right? And semantics simply means that we are structuring our page with, we're definite about how we want to structure our page. Okay, so let me just show you how it works, right? So I'm going to go to about.html, right? I'm going to get rid of these links we have here. Now this is the body of the page. In the body of the page, usually when you open a website, you have something that looks like a header. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to open my website, Zeno Trust Academy. I'm going to do that very quickly. So if you look at my website here, you see that we have, you know, like this top section here. So this is like the header section of the website, right? And subsequently we then have more content, right, in this other part of the website. Great. Now when you're building your web page, right, let me come back here. When you're building your web page, right, it helps to actually break up your different sections of your website using the right tag. Okay, so for example, if I'm building a website and it's going to have a header section, I'm going to use what is known as the header tag. Okay, and the header tag doesn't really mean that it will change the way the page is displayed. No, it's just for, making sure that your markup is semantically written. Okay, semantically written means that everything you are writing has meaning. Okay, and it's also important for search engine, right? For example, the main text on your website, let me just come here, right? So for my website, for example, I think this will be the main text: web development courses and tutorials. The main text should actually be h1. You should use the h1 tag. Okay, and there should only be one h1 on your web page. That's an example of semantic programming. If a search engine crawls through my website now, they will see this main text as the how will I describe it, as the main, purpose of my website, right? The main description of my website. Okay, so let's come back here. So for example, also on a website, I'm going to have some navigation, right? So in my case, this is like links, right? Navigation kind of. So if I click on here, it will just slide down, right? But the way you write that in your markup is you can use a nav tag to place your navigation. So this is where I'll maybe place my links or something like that. So let me just add a link here, and this can say maybe home, and let me just duplicate it twice. This can say about, and this can say maybe contact. Okay, yeah, so this will be inside the navigation, and maybe here I'll just add maybe okay, I don't want to, let me just add a paragraph here and say maybe will be my logo or something like that. Okay, so all of this will be inside the header. That's how semantic programming actually works. Now the remaining part of my content, right, I can put it inside what is known as a main tag. So I'll say main. So this is like the main body of my content, right? All right, so if you look at most websites, you see that many of the content are divided into sections, right? So this is like, I'll call this the intro section, right? Because when a person lands on it, I want them to be able to have a grasp of what my website is about from this first big section here, aside this header here, right? So what I can do is I can come inside this main. Remember, we have this header and we have this main. Every content will go inside this main. Before I even talk about the main, let me show you something. If I scroll down here, you see that my website has a footer. There's also what we call a footer tag. So I can say footer. Okay, so you see now we have a header, a main section that will contain the main content, and a footer. So in this footer is where I can maybe say copyright and maybe 2021 or something like that, and save. Let me come back here, oh, this is the about section, so I need to actually open it. Anyway, it's just for explaining semantic programming. Okay, so inside this main section, right, I can have different other sections. Okay, so if for example I wanted to have an intro section like this one here, or this first section, I can actually name it whatever I want. So let me add a comment here and say intro. I will then create a section, right, and inside that section, let me introduce you to another tag they call a div tag. In other words, this div simply means that you are dividing your page into like different parts, right? And it doesn't really change the way your page is displayed, but it helps you organize your content. So this can be intro section, right? If I have some services I'm rendering on my website, let me just say services, right? I can come here, create another section, and inside it I'll create a div, and this is where I'll put all the content for my services. So here maybe I can say something like, let me just add a h2, and I'll just say intro section, or maybe I'll just say intro, and here I can actually just say services. So I'll come here and I'll say services. Okay, and I'll save. Okay, so I hope it's making sense how you can organize your code into different sections and all of that. So that's basically what semantic programming is about. So like I can't actually cover all the tags that we need when we are writing our code in this one shot. I want to make this video as short as possible, just to give you a quick grasp of what you need to know to be able to write your HTML markup as fast as you can. Okay, so I think that's about it for semantic programming, right? Like I said, I have a course on how to build website with HTML, CSS, and SAS. So you can absolutely check that out if you want to go in depth, like from beginner to advanced, where we talk about animations and all of that. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of this crash course. Thank you so much for watching. If you're not subscribed to my channel, I want to encourage you to subscribe, and I'll see you in my CSS crash course. All right.